the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming. We're calling the meeting to order. Betty, if you would let the record reflect that the board met in executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person in collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. Our first item of business is student recognition.
Care to join me?
I would love to.
Thank you. Is there anybody from music here? So, Mr. Domingo, how are you?
Very good.
Scanning and looking for musicians.
Great
To see you. Thank you.
See you.
Okay, so there's a lot of you here tonight. How are you? Good. It's good to see you. Okay, so our first student recognition is for the Long Island Strings Festival. So the Long Island String Festival provides the opportunity for outstanding string players from each school district in Nassau and Suffolk counties to come together to perform challenging orchestral repertoire over the course of a few days and to perform in a concert under the direction of distinguished conductors and music educators. This year, 7 of North Shore's finest musicians were asked to participate. So when I call you up, we are going to give you a certificate. We're going to shake your hand and take your picture. So, Julia Capitelli.
Congratulations. Very good. So we can
John Labate.
Congratulations.
And Richie's son. Got here. Do you have more than just these? No, that's all? Okay. So congratulations. Photo. Bravo. Can I ask you to give that to Richie?
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
I'll send his pen. I have a way.
Okay. Okay, so we will shift gears now to our to our fine arts. So these are this is Nassau County High School student juried art competition and exhibition. 2 of our AP drawing and painting students, Catherine Hagan and Alyssa Hartman. You can come up. Nice to see you.
Congratulations.
Okay. Alyssa's here or not here? I guess not here. No? All right, so we'll just brag on you for a little bit. Both Catherine and Alyssa had their artwork accepted into the 2018 Nassau County High School Student Juried Art Competition and Exhibition, which took place at the Art Guild, located at Historic Elderfields Preserve in Port Washington. Their art was on view from November 3rd through November 25, and the exhibit was sponsored by PM Pediatrics and Blick Art Materials of Carl Place. The art of 46 high school students in grades 9 through 12 from 12 public and private schools throughout Nassau County were selected to exhibit in this professional gallery setting. Congratulations. Right? What was your piece?
Oh, I had 2 pieces. I had one called Dim Spot off of Lady Macbeth, and I had another one called Anti of my dad boxing.
Anti what?
Just Anti, but it's of my dad boxing.
Oh, okay. I'm sure your mom appreciated that. Congratulations.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
You're welcome. Nice to see you all.
Still owe you a bow tie.
Yes, you do. Thank you. And you know what? I owe you a visit because I was supposed to come over and pick one out. So thank you for saying that. Thank you. Okay. So shifting gears to the athletics and the physical, you'll be shocked to know that the women's cross-country team had a great season. Shocking, right? So our women's varsity cross-country team won the Nassau County Class 3 Championships by defeating the other 18 schools in the county again. Overall, this is the team's 13th consecutive county championship, and in addition, they have compiled a consecutive league meet streak of, who wants to take a guess of how many wins?
It's over 100.
You're not supposed to answer. It's over 100. Higher, 141. 100, all the right numbers, right? 141 wins in a row with no losses over the past 12 years. That is incredible. Congratulations. So, I'm going to call your name. Coach? And Don? We're going to call him up.
Don Jean's here, it's kind of
Well done. Oh, I didn't even see you, Don. How are you? Congratulations. Amazing. Okay. So, Jamie Bayon.
A lot of them.
Congratulations.
Done. Stay here. Hannah Bradford.
Congratulations.
Julia Carroll.
Congratulations.
Madeline DiPietro.
Congratulations.
Carolyn Doyle.
Congratulations.
Kate Gilliam.
Congratulations.
Olivia Lamond.
Congratulations.
Fiona Reagan.
Congratulations.
Carolyn Reiner. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Sophie Rosenkrantz. Pamela Salas.
Congrats, Pam. This is for you.
Nicole Schneider.
Thank you.
Congrats, Nicole.
Thank you.
Araceli Sierra.
Congratulations. This is for you.
Isabella Stryanikova.
Congratulations.
Okay, so we're probably going to have to, and lens is
Double
probably
them
not
up.
quite that wide.
Yes, we can on this way, and maybe
Yes, you stay.
down a little bit on the everyone in the front. A little bit, so scooch down a little bit. I'm gonna stand over here. There we go.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I'm gonna stand this way, so everybody look at me over here. Ready? One. Ready? There you go. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm staying up here because I'm in a
I have the men's too?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, and now for the men's varsity cross-country team. They finished their 4th undefeated season. They now have 56 consecutive wins, and they haven't lost a meet since early in the 2014 season. The North Shore boys were once again the division and conference champions, and they added another county championship title to their previous 4. Although Valley's, where's Ed Corona? Is he here? I thought I saw him. Ed Corona, come on up. Sorry about that. Where's he hiding? Okay, so although Valley Stream North was favored to upset our winning streak, and I worked there for a short period of time, so they have nothing on you. Okay. The Vikings put together a tremendous performance to once again capture the County 3 championship title. Senior Jack Rosenkrantz won his 3rd consecutive county race, 2nd consecutive state qualifier, and finished 5th in New York State Class B championships. Congratulations, gentlemen. Okay, so Thomas Burfind. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's for you.
Eamon Esposito.
Thank you. Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Andrew Gerard.
Congratulations.
Dylan Kenny.
Congratulations. It's for you.
Carson Paradis.
Congratulations.
Luke Reagan.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Jack Rosenkrantz.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sam Rosenkrantz. Imagine what it's like to run with this family.
Congratulations.
Zach Sullivan. Like this. Should I know yourself?
No, it's clip on.
Come see me. Congratulations. Always say yes. And James Bizik, come on up. There you go.
Absolutely. Congrats.
Well done. All right, congratulations, everyone. Take your picture. Come on closer.
The little boys in the front.
Kind of like the same thing. If you guys wouldn't mind just going there and going down a little bit. That'd be awesome.
in front.
There you go.
How about you guys? Carson, come closer. Take a minute. There you go.
Let them go first. Okay, this way. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right.
All right.
Thank you.
I need another pen. It's a big one.
This is a big one. So Milagros, where are you? Come on up. Well done. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Tell me how to say your last name.
Bush Frere.
Bush Freeze. That's not as hard as it looks.
It is.
Right. Imagine having chorizo. Right. So Milagros Bush Freres is a News 12 scholar athlete during the fall season. She's also she's a volleyball player. News 12 and Bethpage Federal Credit Union selects 30 student athletes each year among thousands eligible for their scholar-athlete scholarships. And this year, Milagros was the first student athlete selected to receive their award. As the award implies, students must not only be among the top players in their sport on Long Island, but must also excel in the classroom. Milagros has been an outside hitter for the Vikings volleyball team for the past 5 years, led the team to this year's undefeated conference championship, and was selected to the all-county team for the past 2 seasons. Last summer, her club team won the Northeast region at Nationals. That's impressive. As a student, Milagros is in the top percentile of her graduating class, is an IB diploma candidate, and a member of the National Art and Social Studies Honor Societies. Her academic resume could go on and on. However, the most outstanding aspect of Milagros' entire resume is not what she does in the classroom and on the volleyball court, but what she does for the local and global community. Just to list a few. When do you have time? Right?
I'm a busy person.
I guess so, right? She raised $800 for the Hurricane Relief Fund in Puerto Rico on her own through henna painting at Mini Mart. She's a member of the Buddy program at the high school. She's a peer leader. She volunteers to feed the homeless with her church youth group, and she has marched to advocate for gun control and women's rights. And you also like paint stuff too, am I right?
Yes, water bottles.
Yeah.
Among other things.
Exactly. Okay. that you like then donate for charity or something, yeah? Okay. Wonderful. So Milagros is obviously a shining example of all that is good about humanity in North Shore, so congratulations.
Peter? Can I add something? Just, Milagros, I wanted to, as an ex-athletic director, I wanted to congratulate you. People need to realize there are hundreds and hundreds of student athletes every season, and to be selected with this honor is just terrific, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You get a free pen. Yeah. That can't be your first pen from North Shore.
It might be.
Ready, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Congratulations. You're welcome so much.
That concludes our student recognition. Thank you so much for everyone who took the time to come out tonight. It was great to see you all, and you all deserve the recognition and congratulations that we've had tonight. Thank you for coming.
It's like the coolest part of my job.
Oh, it's great. We are going to move on with the meeting. The next item that we have on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any comments or discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Action 4 is the approval of the treasurer's report. If there's no objection, we'll do them together. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Is there any discussion or questions? All in favor? I know 2 something. We will move on to 5, which is the report of the superintendent.
Very good, thank you. So just want to take a minute to wish everyone a very, very happy Thanksgiving. It is really hard to believe that next week, Saturday, will be December. Winter concerts start early next week, and I look forward to seeing lots of folks there over the course of the next several. Tonight, I once again, as they all leave, I wanted to just welcome and congratulate all of our athletes and artists. They are incredibly impressive. In a few minutes, Olivia Bawatsi, John Hall, and I will provide a comprehensive update on the work we've done thus far and our future plans in the area of safety and security. And I want to thank both of you for your very hard work and your thoughtful planning in assisting us to improve conditions of safety for our students and our staff. So thank you very, very much. It has been a lot of work. Since last year, we've made quite a bit of progress, and we've had multiple evaluations completed. And that said, ultimately, it's our intention to balance safe and secure buildings with schools that are welcoming and comfortable for kids as well, and accessible. So we have a lot to share with you. We will also begin our public discussion of the budget this evening. 2019-20 budget requests were due. We're now meeting with all of our administrators to review their requests, and in a little while, we'll be asking the board for some broad direction setting with regard to the uses of revenues and priorities regarding program and expenditures. So we'll then take that information back, we'll use it to inform our budget development process, and then simultaneously we're building our preliminary staffing models in right now. We'll do our first critical review of them in January. The high school is the one that takes the longest because the scheduling process really doesn't begin until January. So then we'll do a second capture of those once we have actual student enrollment numbers. We do that in the spring, but definitely in time for the board's eventual budget hearing and adoption. So I'm also pleased to report that on December 3rd, we will offer a full and complete breakfast program for K through 12 students. For those that qualify, a reduced price meal is a quarter. And that's a real game changer for kids who wouldn't necessarily eat otherwise. So we often take that for granted, that we live in a very resourced community. But there are children who attend our schools that need assistance, and the difference between a decent meal and no meal is a real game changer for their learning throughout the day. So we're excited for that, and I thank Olivia and her staff for putting that together. We put the middle school together early in the fall, and now we've got that up and running at all 3 elementary schools as well. So thank you very much. At our next meeting, we will round up our student achievement report with the high school. So we'll be getting that information to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to add my thanks to Olivia and to Dr. Giarezza as well on pulling together the breakfast program. We know it was a lot of work, and we really appreciate your efforts on that.
You're welcome.
We will move on to report from the SGO.
Okay. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving from Mike and I to everybody. I hope everyone had a great break. So I guess our track program is all right.
Just a little.
Okay. Don't forget about the soccer team, though. We did pretty well this year.
True.
So the Thanksgiving break marked the end of quarter 1 for the high school. I guess that's 3 more quarters for Mike and I in the school, which is extremely terrifying, but also pretty exciting at the same time. If you want to talk about the girls.
Also our junior class recently held a Thanksgiving pie sale in which they fundraised for their grade funds.
Also the Interact Club, combining with multiple commons classes and other clubs throughout the school, held a Thanksgiving basket drive, which is it's a fantastic event where students come together to create Thanksgiving baskets or baskets of food that we give to underprivileged families who can't afford a Thanksgiving meal, and we go and through the Interact Club we deliver them personally. It's really a great process, and it's very heartwarming. They also have something similar coming up called the Adopt a Family. The SGO personally also takes on a Thanksgiving basket and Adopt a Family, if not 2 of them, because it's such a great event. The Adopt a Family is pretty much the same concept, but with Christmas gifts or Hanukkah gifts, and the families that can't afford certain gifts send in lists of what the kids like, and we go out and we spend our own money and we shop for these gifts, and then we personally deliver them to the family. So it's really a great event. It's very heartwarming, and it's great giving to our community.
Also, one thing that got a lot of buzz around the high school recently was the new televisions, which were put into the high school in the hallways, and I think there's also one in the cafeteria. So yeah, that was definitely a good addition.
They're everywhere, and we have no idea. But yeah, they're fun to walk around. We get updates. The student body gets more involved in what's going on around the school, other than just certain clubs that some students might be involved in. Everyone can see everything is going on. Also, talk a little bit about our progress with CASA. I know Joanna had come and met with the Interact Club, right, this week, and next week she is coming to meet with the SGO. We hope we can start really spreading the involvement and getting students to realize what's going on and more involved in CASA through these specific meetings. Keep going.
Also, we would like to congratulate the theater program on their play 12 Angry Men.
That was crazy good.
I know we both saw it personally. It was definitely a great show that was put on, and we wanted to congratulate them on that. And also, the theater program last week decided on the spring musical, which is declared to be Pippin, and I know we are all very excited about that, and excited to go see it.
Yeah, so mark your calendars. That's in March, I believe. And finally, just more from the arts department and more student achievement along with the students you heard about tonight. There were 9 kids accepted to be involved in or be alternates at the All-State program, whether that's orchestra, band, or chorus. In addition, there was 1 student who was an All-National, part of the All-National Orchestra, which is extremely prestigious accomplishment, and 2 students were selected as All-Eastern in, I believe, the orchestra, and 4 students in the New York honor bands. So those are a very well representation of our arts department in those prestigious awards. And that's about it from us for tonight.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you guys so much for your report. Thank you for sharing the work that you're doing to support the community. We really appreciate that. And for illuminating us on the mysterious screens that we've seen around the school. Thank you.
Which I believe were a gift from the
I think the high school PTO
PTO.
was the gracious, donator of the screens. Thank you.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Next up, we have regular business. Discussion item A is the update on district-wide safety and security.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. So. Thank you. Are you ready? Okay. This. So hi, I'm Peter Gerizzo. I'm the superintendent of schools, as you all well know. I'm joined here by Olivia Bawazzi, our assistant superintendent for business, and John Hall, our director of facilities. And I'd like to welcome John LaPlaca, who is our consultant from Altaris Security, who helped us do our evaluations, and he is here with us this evening as well. So over the course of the past almost a year, we've been doing a really critical look at our safety and security measures, our mental health measures, and we've been making some real improvements to our not only the hard building nuts and bolts kinds of things, but also our processes and our trainings and our drilling and making some real progress. What we'd like to do with the board tonight, and those of you who are here to listen and those of you who may be watching after the fact, is to let you know where we are in this phase process. We essentially have 3 phases that we have embarked upon. The first phase of the project are projects and tasks that were identified as things that we could do right away. Those tasks were completed immediately and/or by June 30, 2018. So we'll take you through what has happened thus far. The Phase 2 projects are projects that were identified and budgeted for and able to be completed by June 30, 2019. And then Phase 3 projects are projects that are long-term capital projects or projects that require a little bit more planning, and those we intend to have completed by June of 2023. Some of them require monies to be put into our operating budgets. Some of them, as you know, we've talked about a possible bond referendum and having safety and security projects as part of that study as well, which we're engaged in now. So, what has happened over the past year? So, right away, we contracted with we installed the Rave app, which is connected to Nassau County Police. Those are on all of our administrators' cell phones. We're able to initiate lockdowns and lockouts and communicate directly with Nassau County Police. We did not have a walkie-talkie two-way communication system in the district. We did not have walkie-talkie two-way communication in the district until last year. The board authorized us to install that. That is active. We had to put some repeaters in because of where we are, but we can communicate with one another in an emergency situation, no matter where we are. In fact, last week, Olivia and I were out in my car, and we had a situation come on the radio, and we were able to deal with that as we were driving through Old Brookville, right from the car, which we would not have been able to do otherwise. There was a time it reaches as far as Glen Cove. So there have been times when we've been in Glen Cove and I've been able to communicate. So that's been a real game changer for us. Our ID badge key card system to access the buildings is in place. We use it to take attendance. We use it to get into buildings. And that we're part of that is enforcing and ensuring that everybody wears them all the time, which is important. Whoops, wrong one. So we, right after, in February last year, we instituted single points of entry at all of our facilities. So there is only one way in. Obviously, there are multiple exits out of the building, but you can only get in at one place for drop-off and pick-up, and then we made some more tweaks to that at the high school this year, where we closed off the gates on the side, so you really have to come in the front entrance of the high school. All of the entries to all of the buildings are limited to the main entrance during the school day. All exterior locks are locked during the day. Teachers are able to, key in at different points during the day, but if you are a visitor, you must come in through the main entrance to the building. We've standardized all of our protocols and practices for drills. We now have established lockdown, lockout, all-call, shelter-in-place, evacuation, and then fire drills, standardized across the whole district. They are monitored centrally, and we have a protocol for how they are initiated and how they are, how we go through them, and then how we communicate at the end. So we put texting capability into place this year, which we did not have, which was a huge limitation for us last year in our ability to communicate. So when those drills are over, if I am around, you have probably gotten them from me. We had a lockdown drill. It's now over. Everybody's back to normal. If I am not available to do that, someone else in the organization will do that on my behalf. We've also practiced these drills on purpose, where I do not participate because I'm not always in the district. So in the event that I'm not here, there needs to be duplication in capacity on how to manage these drills. So we've done that. We had an external evaluation of all of our facilities through Alteris. We had Departments of Homeland Security here to evaluate all the facilities. We are now actually having a third assessment, not really an assessment, but as we study for a possible bond preparation, our architects from CS Arch are working to look at the work that we've done and how that may inform the scope of any work that we do moving forward. So it's not an assessment as much as it is an implementation of the bigger projects. We have security personnel. Actually, we assess the assigned security personnel throughout the school day, after hours and evenings. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've done to expand hours outside the school day. We have security personnel stationed inside the main entrance of all the buildings. We added a full-time security person effective July 1. That person covers the lunches and the breaks and roves throughout the building. So in the past, the main entrance was the security person was having lunch. That was monitored by the main office. We took that away from the main office. We want them focused on the phone calls and the office stuff. And so now we have a roving person who gets to all the buildings and covers all those lunches and breaks. We installed security cameras at all the front entrances. We have that live software. And then secondly, we're also very importantly working on the mental health side of this. So we're really talking with our social workers and our psychologists and our counseling department to build an integrated approach to social emotional learning, which, as you know, is a key and core component of our strategic plan. So this year we are assessing where we are in the system with social emotional learning, with wellness, and going to be filling in those gaps. And I talked about the strategic plan. So, I'm going to turn this over to John and Olivia, who's going to handle the Phase 2 work. But so you see all of that essentially happened in a little bit under a year. So we've made some good progress. Where we are with the security personnel work right now, in terms of how we're manning things and staffing things, is so we have the front doors covered and manned. We are looking at how to cover the exterior of the buildings, which we do not have anybody assigned to the exteriors right now. So what I'm in the process of doing is evaluating whether it makes the most sense to hire those people ourselves or to contract that out to someone. So we're just costing that out, and I'll be bringing a recommendation forward to add that layer of additional security personnel in this current year, and then we'll build that into next year, see how it works. Okay? So Olivia, why don't you take this over? Any questions so far?
Can I ask from here?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Phase 2 is a little bit more involved, and like Peter said, we anticipate that it will be completed by the end of June. We are going to begin with the hiring of a half-day health and safety coordinator position. This position is currently being recruited, and John is here and he's helping us out with that. It's going to go through BOCES, and most of our BOCES services are aided through BOCES after a little bit of, they take management fee, but overall it's net positive because we get BOCES aid for it. And like Peter said, we will continue to reassign security staff to cover lunch breaks, and this is very important. We want to make sure that at every point in time there's coverage all throughout the day. And then, as most of you know, we just hired a new architect, and they did a detailed assessment of district-wide security needs with the board assessment, and this will be included in phase 3 of the project that we'll be talking about shortly. At the elementary school, this is what I was talking about. At the elementary school level, we plan to increase the hours of our security personnel by 2 hours. At the middle school, we plan to increase it by 4.5 hours. And then at the high school, because there's a lot of activity here at the high school, we plan to increase it by 6 hours, 45 minutes every day. School days, of course. Now, we were working with Sandy Hook Promise, and this is an anonymous reporting app, and it also has a web-based link where people can go, folks, communities, students, staff can go and anonymously give us tips about life safety and non-life safety activities that is happening around the community. We just received a memorandum of understanding from Sandy Hook Promise, and we just sent it to our lawyers to review. We just got it, in fact, just last week, just before the holidays. For those of you who have been through the school building, we now have a scholarship in place. And this is a web-based system that allowed the district to scan your driver's license and check it against a database. I know some people come here and they want to put up a little makeup to make sure that they are looking nice when we take a picture. But it's just in-house. It's not going to go anywhere, so please don't worry about it. Walk into the building. If you have nothing to hide, there's nothing to be worried about. There are a few tweaks that we have to work out because we have to make sure that all the systems and policies are consistent across the district, and we are working on that. It's working out very well, actually. And then the district is one of the few recipients of a research and development grant from Interlogic Solution. We are going to set up a command center in central office, and all the cameras in the district will be tied to this command center. So we'll be able to view at least the front entrances of every building right there in central office. And in addition to that, we'll install monitors in selected offices. And this is key because some people stay here very late. And sometimes when people leave at 4 o'clock, you know, there has to be somebody to be looking out on the monitor also. So this is going to happen in central office very shortly. That is a simulation of the command center, and it will be housed on the 3rd floor in central office.
So that is, we have, if you can likely imagine, we have hundreds of cameras throughout the district, and so we'll be able to, from one central location, view all the interior and all the exterior footage right from one location. And so that's going to really help us quite a bit. And then we'll have other, like Olivia said, there'll be other selected offices in the district that will be able to monitor, you know, anywhere we have video coverage in a moment's notice.
Great. Okay, so we're moving on with phase 2. District administration is now implementing the following projects. We have lockdown systems throughout the buildings that if pressed during emergency, it plays a message to inform the occupants of the building that we're in a lockdown. We are now tying that message into our walkie-talkies so that everybody with a walkie-talkie in the district will hear the lockdown message when that is initiated. We're looking to purchase emergency protocol flip charts. These are easy charts that the people in the buildings can use as a guide. If you can imagine, in an emergency situation, your anxiety level is high. We want to make it as easy and as possible for people to have the information they need to respond. We're also looking to disseminate checklists that will allow staff members, teachers to evaluate their spaces, and allow us to prepare those spaces for a lockdown or a lockout. Oops, sorry, my first time with the clicker. Oop, that's the... There we go. Oh, back one. There we go. Sorry about that. So there's different emergency responses to different threats that are going on. So a lockdown is a response to an internal threat. A lockout is a response to a threat that is outside of the building. So when we go into lockout mode, we want to be able to disable the key card systems quickly so that we can keep people out and not entering the building until we can assess the issues. During a lockdown, we don't let anybody in or out of the building. During a lockout, the protocol is to not allow people in, but we can modify that depending on the threat that's going on. So having control over access to the building is important. We're looking to install, right now Central Office does not have an intercom system for entering the building, so we're going to install that so that the building can remain locked and we can assess who's coming into the building and determine if they should enter or not enter. It's a level of safety that all of the school buildings enjoy right now, but we're looking to add that to Central Office. Right now, the high school has no magnetic door contacts tied to the camera software and the burglar alarm. So we're going to add those in. That will allow us to detect if a door is ajar throughout the day and respond to that. The loading dock currently at the high school is locked all of the time, but it is an active doorway. So to improve our ability to access that area during the day, we're going to add a key card access to that location so that we can easily access it. Right now, people have to ring a bell, and it's time consuming for our staff to enter in and out of the building. Right now, we have in our lockdown system, when that system is triggered, we have blue flashing lights above all of the key card access doors. We realize that during an emergency, you cannot visually see those lights from the road. So people ultimately during a lockdown would enter the campus and not realize that we're in lockdown until it was really too late, and we don't want that. So we want to be able to add lights that would allow people to see from the road that we're indeed in lockdown, and that's what that bullet is for. Cell service in the buildings is okay. Can be better in some areas due to the construction of the facility. We want to improve through using boosters strategically placed throughout the building to improve our signals reception for our cell phones. We want to have multi-level means of communication. So in addition to the walkie-talkies, we'll use PA systems, we'll use our phones, we'll use whatever means we need to use to respond and communicate. Right now, on some of the doors in some of the classrooms around each of the buildings, when we go into lockdown, the children are instructed and are trained during their drills to go to a location where they're out of sight and cannot be seen from the doorway. In some cases, that is not possible in certain classrooms due to the amount of glazing that is there. So we want to add shades to those doorways to obstruct the view into the room and allow the students to stay out of sight. identified by the principals, especially in the grade schools, was the lack of PA speakers in bathrooms. So when the lockdown message was initiated, it was difficult for people to hear the lockdown message in bathrooms. So to address that and follow up on the requests of the staff, we're going to add PA speakers into all of the bathrooms in all of the buildings around the district. Also, in addition, the gym areas can be very loud during the activities, so a lot of times when PA call is made into the gym, you cannot hear it. So we're going to add a visual light that illuminates when there's a message so that the staff there can respond. The mental health, do you want to?
So this is, the mental health training is arguably the most important component of all of this, right? So as we can harden our exteriors, we can put lots of procedures in place where we can communicate, but if we are not necessarily looking at the health and wellness of our students, seeing signs, risk factors among students, we can address a lot of things ahead of time. So our 2018-23 strategic plan was adopted by the board back in early September. We have constituted our social emotional learning committee. They are having their first meeting, I think, in the next week or so. Part of their work will be to establish a K-12 multidisciplinary team to study issues of mental health across the district. They will also be conducting a K-12 district needs assessment this year just to determine what is it that we need in the areas of mental health and wellness, and then we could build a plan to implement those in the ensuing years. We're looking to develop a referral plan and approaches to address at-risk students. So how, if we have students that we are concerned about, how do we identify who they are? And once we do, how do we address their needs for all different kinds of symptomology? And then also part of the plan is monitoring all the instructional matters, including scheduling and calendars to reduce stress and wellness and mental health, right? So those are the key targets. If you got your strategic plans in the mail, right, anything in the red that was noted are the things that we're working on this year. Those are the four major topics that we're digging into in mental health and wellness in 18-19. And then there'll be another series of action steps that are unfolded thereafter. Okay, but this is not to be underestimated how important it is, and how more complicated it is. Right, so we can put videos in, we can install cameras, we can, have walkie-talkies, apps on our phones, command centers, we can have all of that. The addressing the mental health of kids can be much more elusive and complicated. All right, and then phase 3 are things that are coming up in the future, right? So we'll take a look at these on an ongoing basis, but they require quite a bit of funding, right? So if we are going to talk about entrance vestibules at the buildings, those are costly and uniquely complicated, or maybe not so complicated depending on the school. So we have, we've evaluated all of those. We sort of have a loose idea of how that's going to happen, but we need our architects to do the design work. And so anything that happens by way of those vestibules are likely to require quite a bit of funding. And then we are looking at, installing window film on low classroom windows, other classrooms as we deem necessary, those the district-wide. We're also looking at the feasibility of installing electric door locks in classrooms, installing additional security cameras throughout the district, reviewing security protocols and plans with our district architect for new ideas and best practices. So this will be an iterative, evolutionary process as we move forward. So we don't want to get to a point in time where we say, okay, we've done this, we're done, let's move on to something else. We want to keep assessing where we are and ensuring that our technology is up to date, our protocols are up to date, and that we're evolving with what the needs of the buildings are. John, you want to take these? Sure. Okay.
All right, so moving on, we've, through the various assessments, we've received some guidance as to recommendations to improve safety around the buildings. So if you could see where bollards are large poles that are very durable, that will block vehicle access to areas. So if you've been to Glenwood, that walkway down the back to the playground is an area that we would like to add a bollard to that, as well as Glen Head, that walkway on the east side of the building, we want to do that as well. Wood line markings to identify entry and rally points from buildings. So in areas, sometimes the best action will be to leave the building, or if people are outside the building and need to go to another location, we want to identify as discreetly as possible, but so our people know where these rally points are. If you can picture the woods in Glen Head, that would be a good place to go and have a rally point there. So we'll look to do that. Traffic cones, barricades to close off driveways and parking lots during an emergency. We've done a lot of this already, but as we learn and witness things that are going around the buildings, we may learn something about an incident in the future, which I hope never happens, but we're constantly learning and evolving. We will add traffic cones and barricades and other means as needed. And then an important thing for our first responders are standardized interior and exterior door numbering. We need to be able to tell our first responders and show our first responders where the classrooms are. So if there's a classroom 100 has an incident and everybody's calling about that, the police and the fire and the emergency responders need to know where room 100 is. And it needs to be uniform. If one building has a different sign than the other, it can be confusing. We want to make this as easy as possible. So uniform, standardized numbering is important. Our first responders have asked, if you've seen in the front of the buildings, there's a black box called a Knox box that has important information inside of that. But our law enforcement has asked for an even quicker way to access the buildings rather than opening that box and gaining a key card or a key. We're going to add keypad locks for strategic doors. This way there's a code for first responders to punch in very quickly and gain access to our buildings. During a real emergency, they're coming in. They're not going to even hit the code, but if there's something where they need to get in quicker, it's not as deemed as threatening as maybe a lockdown. They want to be able to get in easily. We want to have a secondary location where we can make PA calls to the buildings. A lot of the centralized PA locations are in the main offices. If the main office is compromised, we can no longer use the PA. We want to have another area around the building where we can do messages to get information out to the occupants. Key management system, so we have a lot of keys. If you've seen your custodian, he or she has a lot of keys on their key rings. There's a lot of different keys for things. We're trying to standardize as much as possible, but there are several different keys for each building. Substitutes that come to the building need a key to the classroom. We need to manage those keys. If we hand out a key, we want to get that key back to make sure we have it and it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Moving on, we're looking to assess and upgrade exterior lights. We're trying to balance that with keeping our neighbors happy. We have to find that balance. We don't want to illuminate the place too much to where we're disturbing our neighbors, but we want to find that balance where we're safe and secure and have a well-illuminated facilities for people to see. when they're going to the cars, and for us to see others, people out there that are around the buildings. Similar to the uniform numbering that we were talking about, uniform signage, so that everybody coming to Glen Head sees the same signage as Glenwood Landing, as Seacliff, as all the buildings, so that we have clear and concise information for people to follow when they come on site. Landscaping, hazard mitigation. So if you can imagine, there's a large hedge somewhere around the building, and we've looked at all of this. We've removed a lot of bushes in the past to address this. There could be a hedge or a bush that is blocking the view of a camera or allowing somebody to hide something there. So we want to look at the exterior of the buildings and, mitigate any obstructions and conditions that can conceal something dangerous, while also maintaining a nice looking campus. There's a balance there. Tied in with the health and safety we just heard about is to train our key staff members to recognize and deal with mental health issues among students and staffs. Oftentimes it's not going to be the counselor or the principal or the teacher that talks to a student, maybe the bus driver, maybe the cafeteria worker. We want to make sure all staff members know how to recognize and deal with issues, communicate those issues so we can respond to them in a timely manner. Enforcing the wearing of ID badges, we've talked about that a couple of times. We want to make sure everybody has theirs, wears them. If we look down the hallway, we want to see everybody with a badge. If I don't see somebody with a badge, that person stands out. I want to know why that person doesn't have a badge. That's our goal. That's how we're, sharing that information with our staff. Wear your badges so we can know who you are and we can know who does not belong here. Enforcing staff sign-in and sign-out is important. You can imagine in an emergency, we want to know who's in the building, who's out of the building. As our first responders come, they have a lot to deal with when they respond to a building. Who's supposed to be here, who's not supposed to be here. When we're trying to account for the safety and whereabouts of everybody, we want to know who's out and who's in. Student code of conduct, we want to make sure the students, that's in our policy, they know that code of conduct each year so that they know how to behave, what's expected of them, and also will include the safety and security protocols in that code of conduct so everybody knows, without revealing too much information, how we're going to respond in emergencies. And we're going to keep all classrooms and other access doors in a pre-locked position. That time it takes to lock that door during a lockdown is precious. If we keep that door locked all the time, the teacher just has to close the door and the room is secure. The other important aspect of this is locking unoccupied rooms. It's very important that the staff and everybody locks those rooms when they're not occupied. When the first responders come, when they're checking for that threat, they're going to go to each door. If that door is locked, they're going to move on to the next room. If that door is unlocked, they have to go in and check, and we're going to waste valuable time. So the simple act of locking that door all the time is very important. I skipped ahead. Bullet 1 addresses that. We're going to conduct incident command system training. Altaris has done that for our staff. How do we respond during an emergency? Training, muscle memory, that's what our police officers, that's what all of our consultants tell us. So when our staff practices and is trained on how to respond during an incident, they're ready to take action and have the tools they need to respond. After an incident starts to unfold, we need to reunite students and their parents. That's extremely important. We need to know who can go home with who's going home with the person. Maybe a parent can't be here to pick up their child and they're going to go home with somebody else. We need to know that that's okay, and we need to be able at the end of the day to know that all of our students are safe and home where they should be or with a loved one where they should be. That concludes the last phase of the presentation.
thank you all for that. Thank you for the time and effort that's gone into the work we've done, and of course for the thought you guys put into the presentation to lay out so clearly for us where we are in this process. In particular, I really was very interested in the better coverage that we're going to be able to provide just during the school hours and after school and the hours in which our buildings are open. And I thought the discussion on the mental health aspect was very important as well. We are going to open it up and find out if our trustees have other questions or comments on security. Joanna?
Great job. Thank you very much. And I would agree with Sarah. I think that the mental health piece here is the foundation for this whole program. I'm very concerned about creating a real tight situation, and then we have a physical education class going out, and doors constantly being opened and closed, because that just breaks down your whole system immediately. I'm concerned about kids being outside, involved in athletic opportunities after school and being on the grounds till 5 o'clock. Because again, we can be tight as we want in the building, but those areas really, really concern me. And just going back to the mental health, I think from a very young age of just encouraging people to say something when they feel uncomfortable is so critical. And that's really a skill that you have to teach kids. I think sometimes in their fear, they just kind of coil up, and just being able to express that and go to somebody, I think is very important.
And part of that anonymous reporting system will enable us, there are two, so if, let's say you knew something that you felt like you needed to report, right? You could go in to the app. We're going to train parents and kids how to use all this, and teachers, but you would go in, you could report what it is, and it would either be classified as life-threatening or non-life-threatening, right? So if it's life-threatening, it goes straight to Nassau County PD through their 911 unit, and then they make an assessment on what to do next. If it's a non-life-threatening emergency, it doesn't go through the 911 system, it comes through our system, and then we would handle that as well.
That part of it I'm comfortable with. I'm just encouraging young children sometimes when they're frightened in that situation is not an easy task.
100% correct, yep.
Marianne?
I have a couple things. One of the things we did not address is weekend coverage for when we have the kids in the buildings on weekend events. I mean, obviously you don't need someone regularly, but if we're building a budget, we should build in some security for weekend events. I know we do have security for the athletics. We should analyze that, as Joanna said, to see if we need more for athletic events. I have a question on cost. As I added up what we have in here for the estimates, it's a little over $235,000 without the command center. We don't really have a price on the command center yet. I assume we have to draw it and price it out.
Well, that's the grant.
The command center is free.
Yeah.
It's free?
Yeah.
Even the construction that's going to be done at central office?
No, that will cost, we're going to do a lot of that in-house, but that has to be costed out, you're right.
Right, so that's what I'm talking about, is
Okay.
that. I don't mean the monitoring, I mean
Right.
the actual physical structure. So, part of this is being done in 2018, 2019. So are we taking the money for the $235,000 from fund balance? Is that what we're doing?
Right, so last year we allocated $300,000 of fund balance to safety and security projects.
So
that's
it's going
what's-
to cover those?
Yes.
That's extra, the walkie-talkies were additional amount that we transferred
Last
last
year.
year.
Last year.
So it's about 550,000,
Yeah.
about, without
That's
the
not the
command
personnel,
center.
and that's not the personnel cost.
And I know, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the physical.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
It's a lot of money. So, I mean, I think this is one thing that we've assigned LAC to do, which is trying to get some funding for these security costs. I don't know how we're going to build that in, moving forward. Are we going to do it as part of the budget for 2019, 2020? I know we're talking somewhat about a bond, but I think it's probably a little more transparent for as much as we can put it in terms of a budget rather than a bonding process.
I agree.
So that's just something to think about because it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So some of the construction costs, like building a vestibule, for example, probably would be more costly than the annual budget could manage. Perhaps or perhaps not. We have to have the architects advise us on
It
that.
depends on how you reallocate the space, so
Yeah.
I think that has to be taken into
Absolutely.
that scheme. As you said, it's more possible in a school like the high school that actually has a vestibule or Glen Head than it would be in Seacliff that does not have a vestibule already,
Yep.
or the middle school.
Yep.
So that's a very cost heavy investment that I think has had limited testing as to how successful it is. I mean, I would really like to get more data before we invest in vestibules as to what the effectiveness of those vestibules are.
Okay.
Dave?
I had a few comments. One of them builds off of what Mary Ann had said. Phase 3 is very much theoretical at this point.
We don't have cost.
Not just the cost, but
and-
these are big questions,
Plans
building
and-
vestibules, putting in film on these classes.
Yes.
That's all to be discussed as part of an overall project with data, as Mary Ann said.
Yes, they've all been, the Phase 3 projects that we've outlined have all been recommended for implementation by either the Nassau County Police, Department of Homeland Security, our external auditors, in most cases, all 3 or 4. And so they're just they're costly, right? So we want to not jump into a big capital project without assessing
Any,
all of the other
well, and
options.
we don't have the funds.
And we
until
don't have the
we
funding
get
to-
board
Well, I think it's
approval to
also
do
that we
something.
want to make sure that if these are things that we decide are in the best interest, that we find a way, but we also make sure we don't just follow recommendations without having a discussion about it.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so I had a few nuts and bolts, quickie questions.
By all means.
The single point of entry took some adjustments. Can we just get some info on the status of that adjustment? The buildings have become accustomed to the new plans, or there's still some hiccups?
I think they've adjusted. The high school was a little bit more, high school has a lot of doors, right? More doors than any other campus in the district. And it's an open campus, so kids are in and out throughout the day, so that took a little bit of shaping, but it's there. Once we've given folks direction on how to get in and how to move people through that, they've been very responsive. We haven't had any issues. No, it's actually gone very well.
The Phase 1 implementation of the LiveView software has been implemented.
Yes.
But until the command center is up and running, that's not yet
So
going anywhere.
we can see, no, it's no. So it's operational right now. Certain identified people have it on their desktops.
Okay.
And so you can log in, you
Okay.
could log in and you can
So
see it. So
it's-
it's
The
there.
functionality's there, but it doesn't have the optimization that control center would give us.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Okay. The Sandy Hook Promise tips, just tell us where they go and what happens when those tips are received.
So they either go to, they either route to the internal administrator, so likely the principal or assistant principal, or if somebody makes someone reports that someone is going to create harm or cause harm, that would route to Nassau County.
Okay.
Okay? And then there will be people in the 911 call center who are trained on the Say Something software.
Okay.
And so it will route directly to them, and then they'll move it along.
Okay. Just a couple more. Just as an aside, when we got a report this comprehensive, it generates a lot of questions, but I do want to echo what my other trustees have said. There's a lot of very good work that's gone in here, so I thank you, Olivia, John, Peter, and everyone who went into this. In the tallying of the cost, the cell towers for the boosting and an estimated completion wasn't yet in there, so I think that's a number that, when you're ready for that, you'll add that in there.
It's not as much as you would think.
Yeah, the cell carrier almost supplies it, because they want you to
Sure.
use your phone.
And your data, yep.
So we're only boosting, we're not boosting all the systems, right? So the system that we use as our carrier is who we are boosting.
Okay.
Right.
And the final thing, to echo the mental health piece, but also really drill down to a point that I've been kind of hammering, is the development of a referral plan and approaches to address at-risk students. Yes, this is part of this, but in general, that identification of students who need help, I think, related to the security piece, but also related to the role of the school in general, cannot be emphasized enough. That's a huge, huge part of it. That for those students who don't have a connection to the school, who demonstrate ostracization, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we reach out to those kids. I'm glad to see that in here, and I thought it was worth highlighting. But again, thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. And that's also, if I can just add to that, that's not just about kids who are, the intent of that is not just about kids who are seeking to do harm, right? We have kids who are in and out of crisis and various points in time all throughout their school, and so we want to make sure that they are well cared for, that we are equipped to notice when things are awry with them, and that we're also equipped to help address their needs, whether we can do it internally or externally. I know you didn't mean...
Well, it's part of the security piece, but I think when you cast that net,
yes,
you're hopefully going to catch students who are just not filling their potential and not on the right path. And you can just catch kids who aren't necessarily in danger of becoming violent or threatening, but who are just needing additional help. So I think that's part of the overall picture. So thank you.
We agree.
Let me see if I got anybody that hasn't spoken. Lisa, did you?
I won't repeat everything my trustee colleagues have said, because I have a bunch of those written down and I agree. I'll just pick out some points. I agree with the mental health component, but I would add that not just the student needs to be attended to, but the family unit. So I know in the strategic plan, there was a piece about developing kind of a family liaison position with that work. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand, given that I'm pretty familiar with family work, and that's really, really important for follow-through and buy-in, and it's usually a systemic piece. I'm going to talk about the lighting, and I think that came in the extra part at the end of. I come up here in some late evenings in the winter picking up from late track meets, and it is dark. And there are a lot of young women and young men coming out from those buses, just scattering. And it's pretty that since probably the last significant lighting assessment was done, maybe around the track, lighting and environmentally friendly lighting that doesn't insult our neighbors is probably something that will
directional
lighting,
a lot of advances,
safety light, because it is up at the high school, the middle school, it is.
The middle school too, yeah.
In the middle school, I'm a little concerned when I'm down there on my own. And I was happy to see the emergency response protocol flip chart, because we do have a lot of substitutes that come in all through the district, and for them to know the security protocol, again, being careful that that's not something that is, loose lips, but they know that when they're in our buildings and they're caring for children in the classrooms, that if an event happens, or even a drill, they're aware beforehand, and then they have especially of our substitutes that are frequent flyers that are coming in here all the time. And even our continuing education instructors as well, that they're well informed.
We're not waiting for the flip charts. There's already folders and folios.
Right.
You just don't, for transparency, we're not waiting for flip charts, but we are sharing.
But there'll be an improvement, you feel,
Yes.
over what you...
Well, based on all these new things that are coming down our pike. And I do agree with Marianne and Joanne. I think we all would agree that coverage for our activities on the weekends, especially in the fall and the spring, the events that are going on here, baseball, softball, track. And plays,
Theater
the productions. There are a couple major, I'm going to say track, but major track events where even schools, many schools coming from all over Long Island and Westchester descend upon this campus. And we need to be thoughtful about those particular events that are very overwhelming in terms of people on our campus. So, thank you. Good work.
If I could just talk to that too. We collect an extensive list of activities supplied by each of the principals. I make a shared calendar with all of those events on there, and all of those, if they request security, those are assigned on like a 2 or 3 month block at a time. So I just assign from the end of November to early March security for any identified event moving forward.
Awesome.
And if they tell me the day before that this was moved or that I'm getting somebody there to the best of my ability.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Rich, please, yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I just have a question about the single point entry and when visitors come to the building. I know now we've implemented the scanning system for visitors to come through. What kind of a database is it actually checking? What are we really looking for when these visitors come in?
It's a web-based database of sex offenders, and then incorporated with any input from Power School or inputted by the principal or any a user as far as custody issues. So that's what it's looking at.
Okay, so I know the system is relatively new, have there been any issues, particularly if there's a custody issue involved, because that could become pretty problematic very quickly. So has anything, what kind of thought's been brought to that if a situation comes up of that nature?
Even prior to scholarship, each school had a very good process in place for identifying and sharing information with the security guard as to who could go and, who had a custody issue. So on that point, the system will just streamline that. I haven't been aware of any custody flags. We do have others getting flagged because they share a name with somebody in the database. So it hasn't turned out to be actually that person because the person's in front of us and the guy lives in Oklahoma. But at that point, the principal's been involved and works closely with the security guard to make sure that there's more than one person determining that that's not the person on the file.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary, you had something else?
Yes. Just following up, this was not what I raised my hand about initially, but Lisa's point about the lighting. We had discussed this a couple of years ago, and we did put in some lighting, but as I recall, it's my understanding that for lighting for the field areas themselves, that we do have the wires underground. So we could put up, and now with new LED lighting, it would not be as offensive, because it's not only a safety issue from a security standpoint, but it's also a safety issue that, come November, there are kids completing games, and it's dark.
Yeah.
So that would be something I would really like to look at. We're one of the few districts that can't host an evening football game or other event. And I think that would probably be more of a bond referendum issue, so something to put in there. But my question for John is, I mean, I'm going back 30 years when I was a young lawyer. We had a magnetic key card system because we had highly confidential information and had our ID on it, and you couldn't go in or out of a door without your magnetic key. And it's now very, very common, but then it was like new innovations. With that, when I hear about keys, did we ever price out and see what it would cost us to put in a magnetic key card system? Would that be, I mean, I'm just thinking to have people with keys.
All physical keys.
Yes. And it would be your ID, it would be your entry.
So we've talked about that. We haven't priced it out specifically, but we've talked about implementing something like that, or at least understanding what it would be like to implement something like that with the architects, right? As something that would be part of a bigger, that would probably be part of a bond, right? There are some districts that have kids key into classes. That's how the teachers take attendance. We don't have the technology to do that, at this point, but we want to understand that better, right? Because I agree with you, having no keys.
And then you have a database of who's
Yes.
going where, right? Which is, I think, even
Yes.
more important.
Yes, and you can
know
disable
where
the
people
card.
are, and you
Yep.
know if they've gone, they've
Yep.
left, who's in the building, who's
Absolutely.
entering classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for protecting people coming out, but, control internally.
Agreed.
And I just wonder why we never looked at that up. The idea, all I can think of is like the Wizard of Oz with the guy with the keychain when you're talking about,
That's some of our custodians look like that, yes.
a master of keys. No one enters the Emerald City. It's really archaic to me that we're talking about a master key system.
Yeah. It's having done this before, obviously not here, but having rekeying your district is hugely
Oh,
expensive.
God.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Like in my former district, we spent, I think, $350,000 rekeying the district. I had one key that opened every interior and exterior door in the entire district, right? And there were different levels of keys based on what you needed within the system, but it's huge. Keys are hugely expensive.
I think the only other thing I'll add is that I went to a small conference at Stony Brook about evidence-based strategies for preventing gun violence, and their single takeaway was really the idea that kids that are in crisis usually say something to somebody. You need your students to feel that they know how to report it to you and that something will happen if they do. And then it really emphasized that you need a team of people. That's not just one person who's going to look at it, but you need a team and they need to meet. And that the training for that team is very important and somewhat hard to come by at this point, right? That we don't have a lot of resources to train these teams to look at all the different aspects you need to evaluate what the threat is and to who, to the kid, him or herself, or to the community. And that, so, and that can be a budget issue too, right? If you need whole teams and they need specific training, and then that's a key to what we really want to do, right? Which is, the healthy kids and the continued follow-up after the crisis. It is significant.
So, very.
Does anyone else have additional questions? Given the presentation, I'd like to make a motion to add a public comment now, public comment period at this point. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Or in favor? All right, we will go ahead and add public comment now. If you wish to make a comment, if you would come to the podium, give us your name and town of residence. If you would please address your comments to the board. This is the public's opportunity to share their thoughts and concerns with the trustees. Mr. Romano, please.
Hi, good evening. Jerry Romano, Seacliff. No one stopped me when I walked in here this evening. And
Yes, we have it.
no, I'm just saying,
No,
it's
you're right.
it's not a 9 to 5 school day issue. Certainly not the stuff I experienced when I was in school. And in almost every one of these cases, one of these active shooters have been students, right? I mean, almost every one. It seems to me like the mental health piece should be number one on the list. Like, that's the most important thing. All the other security stuff is great, but can all be overcome if somebody walks in. If I'm a student, or not a student, if a student walks in with a backpack with an automatic weapon in it, how will you know? That's the question to ask. I mean, I walk into buildings in Manhattan where all my stuff has to be screened before I get in. I know it's not practical. I know it's crazy. I know getting on planes is a real pain in the ass today, but it's reality. It's the world we live in. The other question is, Intralogic is the company? They're giving you stuff for free?
They're a vendor, yeah.
They're a vendor?
They're a current vendor too, yeah.
They are not giving it to us for free. It's a grant through the state.
Oh, the state's giving you money?
Yes.
Okay, and they're the best partner?
We're very happy with them.
Okay, just curious. All right, and is the state taking any leadership in this, or are you kind of doing your own thing? Just what I figured.
Yeah, please.
They're not doing anything?
No.
They're kind of behind the curve?
Yeah.
Be honest, I mean,
Well, it's-
they move slowly.
They do.
And this is part of our discussion about working with some other districts to put some more pressure there in terms of funding and,
I wouldn't wait.
Yeah,
I think
they've left a lot of it to local decisions, so people are assessing what their needs are and how they want to address these things, community.
Yeah, I know,
community.
it's a crazy world. I'm glad to see that stuff is being done. But I think, again, the most important thing is that single point of entry. I mean, if they look like a student and they're the threat, how do you differentiate between the threat and the one that isn't? So, I mean, all this other stuff is useless. Monitors, lights, sirens, whatever. And then the other piece is, how close is a first responder? You know we don't get good police coverage here. That's a fact.
Mayor?
please.
So we've actually established a pretty good relationship with the 3rd Precinct, right? So we have 2 officers who are assigned to our district there through the Problem-Oriented Policing Unit, the POP unit. We have police presence at the schools every day. The new Commissioner Ryder in Nassau County has made a commitment to make sure that his officers are visible in all the schools, and we see them all the time now, and that has not historically been the case.
Yeah, I've seen a lot more.
And what we're trying to capitalize on is that having a police officer in the building is not a bad thing, right? They don't always have to be there because there's a problem. Sometimes they're there because they're part of our community and they're making relationships with teachers and administrators and kids. So it's been, we've noticed a noticeable difference this year that the commissioner has committed to.
Okay, because I know it was in the past in Seacliff, there was .75 patrol car. I don't know where the other quarter went, but there was only .7, and they really didn't do anything anyway.
Yeah. No, they're here.
Okay.
Yeah, they're here, and I meet with them pretty regularly.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
On the other point about the backpack, some of the schools have initiated the clear backpacks. That's something, we could talk about, where they require the students to have these issued clear backpacks so they can't bring in any kind of weapon.
Or tampons or anything.
Well, it would be, obviously,
private.
that you could probably put some, I could see some
just
issues,
saying.
but you could put maybe that in a purse. The idea is that you don't want to bring in, a gun or a rifle, right? You're not worried about something this big. You're worried about something, that big.
Hi, I'm Grant Kletter from Seacliff. I appreciate the broad security efforts, and I'm happy to see some of the measures that we've talked about in the past are being planned, and I appreciate that. In March, I attended a board meeting here and spoke of my concern regarding elections being held in schools and requested the district to move all elections from our schools. Before that meeting and since that time, either I individually or as part of a group of concerned parents has communicated with the district on over 9 occasions through coffee and conversations, emails, individual and group meetings, a district-wide safety presentation, district safety meetings, and school safety meetings. In addition, I sent a letter to this board in March on this topic. Unfortunately, in over a year, we still have no answer to our request. I bring up this history not in an effort to express my anger or frustration, but to try to demonstrate that we've been trying to take the right approach in enacting this change that we feel will strongly improve safety in our district. We are requesting a response so that we can understand how the board and the administration feel on this topic of removing elections from schools and whether you are prepared to take the steps to remove elections beginning with this year's school board and budget vote, which is in the full control and authority of this board and administration. Thank you.
Okay.
We probably should have a conversation about it at some point, right? So,
So for the board to discuss it, right, regardless of whether we get emails or whatever, for us to discuss it, we have to discuss it in public, right? We can't get
Fair
an
enough.
email and then all go talk somewhere. I think for us to have a good discussion about it, the board's policy has been that we need to agree we want to discuss it. It needs to go on a public agenda so it's noticed and people can come to that discussion if they want to. So I think that's
I guess the question that
probably
brings up
where
is,
we are with this.
how do we get that discussion to happen? Because I did speak to the board.
Basically,
Somebody
a
else
board
spoke to
member
the
makes a
board.
motion that they'd like to put it on a future agenda, and we get a second, and the board says, yes, let's do it, and then we do it. That, as with any topic that takes, some work, rather than if you just said, how much do we spend on pencils or something, we could,
So this would be the forum for a board member to make that motion?
They would technically have to do it under new or old business.
Okay. I look forward to hearing the new
But
and old business.
I suspect, I suspect someone will.
All right. Thank you.
Just because there's absolutely no reason not to have the conversation, right? That's completely reasonable.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Good evening, Greg Perlis, President, North Shore Schools Federated Employees. First of all, thank you authentically for the seriousness with which you are convening this conversation about safety. I want to plant a seed. There's been some recent changes in the composition of government in Albany, and as a consequence, there are some legislative possibilities that are on the table that weren't there as recently as June. In particular, excuse me, allergies. In your capacity as the board and your capacity as advisors to LAC, I'm urging you to please consider advocating in Albany for the red flag law. I don't know if you're familiar with the red flag law. The red flag law is a piece of legislation. What it does is it allows school officials to petition local judges it allows school officials to identify kids to local judges, and on the order of those judges, if it appears that that child is a risk to herself or himself or anybody else, to step into that person's house and temporarily remove weapons from the person's house. I know we talk a lot, for obvious reasons, about school shootings. I want to make sure there are no kids in the room. I know that we talk a lot about school shootings. That's high profile, it's frightening, it's real. Any Board of Education that isn't doing due diligence on that issue is neglecting its responsibilities. But there's other stuff going on. Studies show that in 49 out of 50 states in the country, teen suicide is up. Studies show that in the overwhelming majority of cases, kids that do try and harm themselves, who survive the first attempt, don't ever make a second attempt. Studies also show that when that first attempt involves a firearm, 85% of the time, it ends in a death. When Connecticut enacted its red flag law 14 years ago, a recent Duke University study finds that at least 70 lives have been saved just in Connecticut on the basis of the red flag law. So the reason it didn't ever pass in New York is that despite the fact that it had footing in the Assembly and footing with the governor and footing in the Senate, the majority leader in the Senate refused to allow it to come to the floor for a vote. That happened as recently as June 2018. There's been a leadership change. I think it's an opportunity for the board to instruct LAC, to advocate vigorously. We have to be clear about what this law does and doesn't do. It's not an arbitrary gun removal law. Teachers would have to come to you, social workers, or rather to Peter. Social workers would have to come to Peter or to Albert or to any of the principals. The school would then have to petition a judge. A judge would have to review the merits. And then if there are merits, the judge can take steps to protect kids from themselves and protect other kids in schools. So, red flag law, LAC, and I rise to ask this of you on behalf of my colleagues in the union. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate it.
If Mr. Perlis wants to send the information to Rich, Dave, and I, with the liaisons to LAC, we can look it over, and then we could put it under old business.
Marianne, Dave, Rich.
And we'll
And then we'll
bring it up in
review it, and then
business
we'll...
too, to get a board
the
consensus on
Right,
directing LAC.
right, exactly.
I think you probably sent it to all of us, right?
I would have to really do, and
Bring
any
it up on
other,
the World Wide Web
not
or
just the law, but the other data that you were talking about, the way it's phrased, it sounds, a little, a little strange that you could just go into someone's home. So I would really need to see the particulars on that.
The other alternate, you could even send it to me and I'll get it in the next board
Right.
update to everybody. So however you want to do it.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
Do we have further public comment at this point? Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
That was an additional public comment. We're going to do the budget and
I think we should still have the usual public comment, which I suspect won't be extensive, but, after we discuss the budget, we'll still have another, because otherwise, it's late before anybody can say anything. My motion was to add a public comment. Our next discussion is board priorities for the budget. Peter, do you want to say anything before we start, or do you just want me to begin the free-for-all?
Well, let's hope it's not a total free-for-all, right?
No, I'm going to keep it tight right
But the function of, this is very, very early on in the budget development process, and what it's helpful to do for us is, thank you all. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
As we move into that process, if there are priorities that the board is particularly interested in having us pursue, either on the expense side or the revenue side, that this is a good opportunity to have that conversation with us. So if we can point ourselves in directions that you would like us to. Getting very specific about, certain items is probably not the most efficient way to deal with this at this point.
I'll email you later. No, no, you're absolutely right.
Right. So, better to probably just keep it sort of high level and let us do some thinking on what the major priorities are. So I'll turn it over to you, and you can get us.
In terms of overview, I'll just add that establishing priorities is a significant part of a board's responsibility on the level that Peter's referring to. So with that, I open it up to my fellow trustees who wish to discuss how our funds should be spent in those priorities. Lisa, it looks like you would like.
I think I've mentioned this before, I'm going to be like a broken record, but as I, look at the strategic plan and a lot of the attention we're spending on the social emotional component, I really would love to see a nice comprehensive mental health department. I don't know how if you would structure it under guidance, but it would be obviously guidance and social work, school psychologists would work together. But I can imagine, I worked in the district for a year in a middle school. I was busy from 7:45 a.m. until 3:30. I had to eat lunch with the children. And it was me and a half an FTE from the high school. And I still didn't feel like I got everything done during the day for the kids. And whether we work with another agency on the outside to do some nice referral work, that might be an idea for agencies that have this down pat. And I know a few, even Northwell has some great programs that we could partner with. Oh wait, yeah, there's so many resources for us to access, but, and it was only up until a few years ago that, not every building had their own full-time social worker, and I still think we might our coverage is probably pretty low in terms of caseload. My colleagues here are very busy. So that would be an expense. I'm looking at the expense side of thing, but I think it would be extremely worthwhile. It satisfies our strategic plan. It has to, and as you said, the professionals are working currently to come up with those, understanding the gaps. That's really at the top of my list.
Great, thank you. Joanna?
I agree with everything that Lisa just said, and I would like the district to consider reestablishing the elementary health education. We've talked so much about the importance of skill development at a very early age. So that is a priority.
Thank you. Dave? And then I'll...
So, trying to keep this high level, so I wrote it down so I wouldn't veer too micro, so I apologize if I do. I'd like to see our budget priorities follow the reports and results of the achievement reports we've seen K through 8 and are going to see soon from 9 through 12. Overall, our students are achieving at a very high level, and we've done that in a way that doesn't compromise our commitment to authentic learning, the SVOs, an individual-based educational program. And those results showed us a lot of areas of success academically, but they also highlighted a few areas that maybe need some attention at different building levels. And so I really want to make sure that we funnel resources as much as we can in those areas. I want to continue our commitment to social emotional learning. We've identified in the strategic plan, which facilitates the above success, as my other trustees have said. We certainly want students who can write, do math, solve problems, speak additional languages. But they're really only going to be able to do this and have successful college careers and civic lives if they have the confidence, the independence that social emotional learning is going to give them. So I want to make sure that's a focus. Regarding one of the pillars of our strategic plan, teaching and learning, I want to make sure that we are focused on being a forward-looking district and direct our priorities in that direction. Certainly with teaching and learning, the continued integration of technology in a meaningful, not just a cosmetic manner, and professional development to ensure that we're not resting on our laurels or thinking that what has worked is necessarily all we need to know. The world, the kids are too dynamic for that to be the case. And then just a little micro, but just in the narratives, I love the narratives. I thought it was a great addition last year. It continues to be a great addition. That said, our administrators and teachers aren't Stephen King. They're not pumping out 2,000 words every 8 months. So I don't want those to be cut and pasted from previous years, but considering our budget is sorry, John, you might be. No offense to John. But considering that 70+% of our budget is contractually obligated to be what it's going to be, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. So if there's a way, as has been mentioned before, and I apologize, I'm stepping on someone's toes who's mentioned this before, to highlight either through bullet pointing or through an executive summary the specific changes that are different from year to year, things that have varied, so that'll help those stand out, so we know within an overall area what changes we may be asked to proceed with as recommendations, so we can help understand and identify and evaluate.
So would it be helpful in those narratives, right? Because some of that they've written, the story behind what is in the budget request that give you context for what's in there, like how it fits within the overall program. Would it be helpful if we made sure that within each narrative there was a section either at the beginning or the end that highlighted the changes in some kind of brief format? So for those people who want to get a high-level summary, it's there. For those people who want to dig a little bit deeper, it's there. And so we could scaffold that reading a little bit. Does that sort of hit the tick the boxes of what you're... Okay.
Yeah, for me, I need the narrative to address why funding on the line is moving up or down significantly, not 1%. But I do recognize that part of the narrative is for some in the community who's looking at it online, who may not have been looking at this line year after year after year and might need the bigger picture of what the department's trying to accomplish, but yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Did you have?
I'm good.
Okay, Rick, I'm sorry, I said I'll call Mary Ann.
Okay.
but
That's
you-
okay.
Either way,
Okay.
whatever.
I think the goals we've looked at in the past need to continually be revisited. I think strength of academic program is key, but with that, we need to continue to look at the breadth of the program that we're offering. We need to continue to give our students opportunities to do all sorts of things, extracurricular, arts, etc. And I think we do a good job at that, but I think there's certain areas that maybe we want to focus in a little bit more. I think perhaps looking at, we have a solid STEAM program, but I think really looking at younger students and looking at things like coding, for example, and bringing those things to the table early on would be helpful for the next generation to come. So, I mean, my bend is obviously towards the STEAM programs. So I really would be very supportive of that. And my feeling is in doing such, it also enhances the other programs as well.
It was like you were at my meeting this afternoon. We talked exactly about this. Right?
The cameras are working.
I didn't want to tell the kids, those are not just TVs. They're actually taking video.
Am I right? That was exactly our discussion.
Okay.
So we're with,
It's fabulous.
we agree.
Mary Ann, thank you for your patience.
No, because Rich actually, and Lisa actually hit on the points I was going to raise. With respect to Lisa's point about the family counseling and the additional counselors, this is something that I've brought up before, and I think something we're looking at in the bond is how to redo the guidance area into something that could be more of a counseling center, and part of that can be funded through OASIS and other partnerships, because you actually rent the space out to them, and the districts actually make money on bringing in these programs. And if we could do it in a way where we've set it up that students can go in there, and they could be going in there about the ACTs or course selection, or about something that's happening at home, and no one would be any the wiser. So I really think that ties into the bonding process as well as looking at where we can get the grants and the funding to cover some of those costs and get additional hands on deck that, would be neutral to the taxpayer. I was going to speak to what Rich spoke about. I think if you look at the scores, that there are some problem areas in math and science. I think where the students are suffering on strong instruction in some of those areas, the higher levels. I think that we need to look at maybe enhancing the course offerings so that our students have better opportunities to get into some of the more competitive programs, or at least are better prepared. And I'm not talking about Harvard, I'm talking about Binghamton, Stony Brook, some of the state universities. If you looked at the admissions rates that they didn't get into, Carnegie Mellon, 3 students applied, did not get in. Other programs, more, to give our students more in their resume, that we can be as competitive as with the Jericho or Syosset when our student is applying to those universities and those programs. I would also like to look at how we fund guidance. I looked at the college fair, the list of colleges that were coming, and I think it's a start, but that's many of the schools that we already have relationships with, that our students go to. I think part of the problem has been we haven't developed relationships with the schools that we don't think about, right? That are competitive and have good programs, and some of them are very cost effective. I mean, I have to say, like the University of Pittsburgh would never have crossed my mind, but for the guidance counselor mentioning it to me. So, and that has a great engineering and medical program. So I'm not just talking about the Ivy Leagues, I'm talking about the more competitive schools, some of the state universities, where we are funding our guidance counselors to go out, meet with the people, plug our students, see what they have to offer, look at the campus, and develop relationships with these places that are not just in the northeast corridor where we tend to send our students. So that to me would be a really important priority. I think some of the kids and some of the parents have expressed disappointment to me in prior years, and about their success in the application process. And I don't believe, looking at the SAT scores and the GPAs and the course selections for these students, that they are any less qualified or less prepared or less bright. And it's puzzling to me when I see scores of 15-something and the kid didn't get into a school that one would think that they should have easily have attained admissions. And of course, my last thing, which I've been talking about, is the restructuring of the administrative structure here. I think we're, for a small district, pretty heavy on administration. There were positions added that were really intended to increase the ability to evaluate and assist our faculty. I'm not sure that the additional layers have achieved their goals, so I would like that looked at and analyzed.
Thank you. I have a few comments as well, although I really am not going to disagree with anything my colleagues have said. I think one thing that didn't come up that I think a few of us have referred to before is I think we want to continue our commitment to the infrastructure that we've traditionally had in the budget, and even though we're looking at other options, we absolutely want to maintain that. We think that's part of our responsibility to the community, is to maintain, what is a very extensive infrastructure and valuable asset. as part of that, I think we probably have some smaller sets of capital items that I would like us to take a look at. I think in some instances, like an example would be our computer networks. I think we've done a fairly good job of maintaining those and looking to always have something in the budget, right? Because you don't want all of your computers to die on the same day. You'd like to replace some every year. And with that, we've done a good job. We've been very forward-looking on the wireless network. And I'm wondering if it is equally true of things like textbooks or furniture or smart boards or things more unique to this district, like we have a tremendous inventory of musical instruments that are critical to a program that's very important to us. And we budget for repairs, but I suspect, and we have Arts Angels who try very hard, but you know, what they can accomplish in a year is not going to maintain a significant asset. And those are the kind of systems I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure I'm completely overlooking a similar asset class, and I'm certain John or
We're
you
thinking
or
about
Olivia
them,
will figure
yeah.
out what they are. But I would, the same way we never want to bubble on anything, we want
Right.
to have the level funding and we want to maintain the value of our assets. I'd like to look at some of these smaller things. I think our commitment to equity has been very sincere and very strong, and we're working on very hard, and I think it takes money at some point to make sure everyone, to really level the playing field, whether it be homework centers, after-school programs, the high-quality summer programming. These are in the same way with the breakfast, which hopefully will end up being revenue neutral, but there's some other things that we should plan for. And as part of that, like this idea of really keeping all of our kids engaged, right? I think there's some cost-effective ways to do that. I think most of our clubs are very cost-effective ways to do that, and we should look carefully at those. But we could also go further with that, like at the idea of, given the stresses our kids are under, given the substance abuse issues, the engagement issue is important, we could even be more adventurous and look at what does it take to have more winter sports at the middle school, right? What does it take to get more kids doing more things? I would echo Dave on professional development. Lisa and Joanna, and specifically Joanna's comment about bringing back a health educator at the elementary level in particular, which we used to have. I've heard a lot of faculty members discuss, so I think, you know, more staff is expensive, but I think we should look at it, certainly. The narratives we discussed, and those are my priorities. P.S. Libraries. I really like libraries. Okay. I put that up there because, you know, I can't let another year go by.
What does that mean?
What? You haven't even been here long enough.
No, I haven't.
Every year I discuss the library funding.
Okay.
It's, you know, because it kind of gets whittled away over the
Understood.
years. If you go way back, like we've lost 2 positions in the libraries. We've moved the funding out of the libraries. But, you know, so I'm just saying libraries.
I hear you.
Olivia knows what I mean. I think she'll tell you, right? Yes, see, you're all tired. They're all tired of hearing about it.
We had 2 librarians at Glen Head,
Wow.
and we now have
One.
one.
Right.
And I think there was one other school that lost a librarian. I think we lost one here at the high school.
The
Right, there
elementary
used to be
had
2
like a
librarians
head.
here at the
the
high
elementary
school when
all
my
had
kids first
Head
started.
librarians and someone else there, and then we eliminated 2 of the 3 positions so that there was just, they all had a head librarian and one person that moved around.
Yeah. If you're here long enough, you know.
You better find that pot of gold.
You better find, yeah.
Okay.
Marianne has added up the value of all of our requests, and it's going to give us a number now, right?
I am going to give you a number. And I will just remind you of American Water and the reassessment and LIPA. That's all I'll say to you. I mean, but it's a wish list, and that's where we start, right? And then we bring it down to what's feasible and a long-term plan as to how we can implement all these goals, right?
This is a discussion about values, and then we have to figure out what we can do. Does anyone feel they've expressed their values and opinions?
I have one quick thought, and I'm going to bring up special ed in it, and you might want to pull it over to new business, and it's only just popped into my brain because I had a discussion with Chris Marino yesterday when reviewing the IEPs for tonight's meeting, and they're doing some really wonderful things in special ed now because it's a brand new administration, and I don't know whether it's been thought about to have the department come and present to the board. I'm not sure Chris has super concrete changes in program, but there have been some changes in program because some of the IEPs reflected it. Since I'm kind of been pulled out of that CSC process, I'm not as intimate with those changes in program as I would be when I used to be part of the CSC. So that was exciting to me to hear some of the interesting things that they're doing to attend to student need for those children who have 504s and are classified. So it was exciting, and I would hope that we could support their efforts as they're developing and attending. They actually want to keep more kids in district, which I found, to be a great thing. So, and if they could create programs for cohorts of kids that we can actually open up to other districts, which occurs all the time, and if we could get some significant reimbursement for that from other districts, it would be a revenue generator for us. But it was exciting to hear some of the ideas that Chris and his two assistant directors have come together to think about now that it's a brand new group. So that's just something to think about, and as you're going through the special ed budget.
Thank you for saying that. They're working really hard.
They're working very hard.
To follow up on that, I had heard that our own Jack Feldman gave a very good presentation on special ed. And I know that sometimes council does come and give those presentations to the board. And would it be possible that we could have one of your little primers on special ed?
Only if you ask really nicely.
I did. I said, I'll say please. I thought that is about as nice as I get, Jack. It doesn't get better than that, my friend. I complimented you. I walked it all out.
I don't want to bring it up, but we tried to do that one day on the weekend, and it never happened.
And it never happened. Well,
I'm available. Just let me know.
Okay, could we do that?
I can attest to the quality of the education that Mr. Feldman provides.
Sounds like new business. We got a couple things now. We got
Yeah.
to keep track of everything.
Somebody's got to keep notes. What?
Right.
Okay.
We'll just say ditto at new business.
This was incredibly helpful. Thank you very much. Will give us good direction setting as we move forward.
Terrific.
I'm sorry.
Because it's what I call a freebie. A freebie.
I'm not complaining. I'm fine. That's great.
She's going to bring it up later.
I will bring it up again later, but, the opportunity was right there waiting for me.
Thanks, Jack. We could have ended 5 minutes earlier tonight.
Yeah.
It's my fault.
Just one more thing. Do we need to get Betty more RAM for her computer for this conversation?
Apparently. Okay. That's the end of that
Excellent.
discussion. We are moving on to the regularly scheduled comments from the public. If anyone would like to address the board, please approach the podium. We need your name and town of residence. Please address your comments to the board. This is your opportunity to share your thoughts, concerns with us.
So no.
Okay, well, I don't want to belabor it then. We will move on to action item C, which is personnel. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you. Action D is acceptance of the independent audit report for the year ending June 30th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have all in favor? Thank you. Action E, approval to transfer funds from the employee benefit accrued liability reserve. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
A second?
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Action F is the acceptance of a donation from Mutual Concerns Committee to the North Shore Middle School that offsets some of the costs of the Greenkill trip. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
And thank
Any more
you.
comments? I'm sorry.
Incredibly generous, thank you very
Incredibly
much.
generous. We are deeply
Yes.
grateful.
I don't want to rush through this. I think it's important that we recognize
Yes.
that from an equity perspective, these trips cannot be funded by the district, and so we rely on these groups to step forth. It's wonderful.
All right, let's make sure we had a clean vote. All in favor? We got a little, okay. Action G is approval of change orders. We have two. They are deductions as we close out Phase 3 of the bond referendum. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Second.
And second. All in favor? Thank you. Action H is approval of budget transfers, $35,000 to cover teacher position changes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Are there questions? All in favor? Everybody's really talked out. Action I, approval of the NISBA policy compliance review proposal. Do I have a motion? A second? Did I have a second? I'm sorry, thank you. Questions?
Yes.
I have a
Bri-
question. Oh, go ahead.
Please.
No, go ahead, Dave.
Just real quick, I wasn't sure if Peter envisioned this. I absolutely understand the need for this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to say. Wasn't sure if you thought this might be an annual thing, a once every so often kind of thing?
So most likely, something that we would use them to help us annually. We pay for this hourly, and so we have a policy. The policy subcommittee of the board will look at a series of policies every year. So it'll be helpful I think it will be helpful for us to continue to use them to consult with us on policies that are required, that are new, that require updating. They then send them to us. We have them reviewed by our council. We can customize them and then bring them through the adoption process. So, go ahead.
So for this year, are you seeing them going through whatever that third is that we're looking, or are you seeing 0 to 9?
I would like to have them do 0 to 9, but with a particular focus on 4s and 5s.
Okay, great. If they can get through that for the max, that's
Right. And
Herculean.
what we can't finish this year, we would carry into next.
Okay.
So my question was, I thought that our policies came from the NISBA policies anyway to begin with, and then
Yes.
they were supplemented, modified by issues that were raised either by council or by NISBA. So I'm not clear to me as to, I mean, I guess this is a much more overarching breadth, but it's kind of it's new, we've never done this before, and I'm just unclear as to what difference this brings to the table than what we do as a policy committee, where we go through it and we get.
So the board members, or me, I'll say me, don't have necessarily the expertise or the very specific knowledge in a particular policy around, I don't know,
So many of those issues, yeah.
sexual harassment, thank you, all right. So they would look at that policy and assess it for compliance, right? So you did all your policies through NISBA whenever you did them, and at
Right.
that point in time, they were probably all compliant and all up to date. But if someone is not always paying attention to what needs to be updated, because new little nuances in the law sometimes happen, or in regulation, it's helpful to have a service to be able to push those out to us. Because they're monitoring this on a regular basis.
So
Does that make sense?
how are we doing this now? Because my understanding was that we're all members of NISBA and we see the information coming down, and these are part of the articles, and that the attorneys let us know when our policies need to be modified. So I guess my question is, I understand that this is a broader scope and why we're doing it, but how are we catching that before this?
probably not as well as we could.
Okay.
I thought we probably had a good chance previously of, if we said we're going to review policy 1, 2, 3, looking at it, the attorneys might catch something that was now out of date. But that if we were missing a policy altogether, we didn't have a good procedure for catching what wasn't there, because we're reviewing what was there. So to that extent, I thought the NISBA made sense. Certainly in a one time, like where someone goes, you don't have any of these, and you go, you know.
Probably could have been tighter.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Are we ready to vote? All right, all in favor? Thank you. We have action J, which is the approval of the agreement between North Shore and the YMC camp at Greenkill. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Do you have questions?
I do.
I have a question.
Oh, you go first this time.
Oh, sorry. So there's an insurance that you can buy for an additional $7 per student. Do we ever buy that? I see it in the contract.
I did too. I noticed that we didn't buy the insurance.
We don't buy the insurance, I guess? No, so I'm just curious, because if a student gets injured, does that go through a policy that we have in the district, and then, I guess, a parent's policy as well?
They're covered through through NYSER.
Right, that's, because I don't know, is that something we ever analyzed, whether it would make sense to pay the additional $7 per student to have the additional coverage? I mean, looking at it, it doesn't seem to be anything that would, it kind of feels like, you know, when Staples asks you for that $15 when you buy your new device. But I'm just curious, is that something we should take a look at?
I'll take a look at it tomorrow.
It may not be something that we need or want, but we should at least think about it. That was my question.
Thank you.
Two quickies, just curious. It says on the contract 25% due, but we paid a very, very much lower number than that. They just let us do that? They just let us hold it with a small deposit?
Yes.
We just send whatever
All right.
we want.
No
We should
cans
try that on the
required.
final bill too, then, Olivia.
Because no one wants to go to Greenkill in December but us.
I waived it. Second question is, looking at the website, it's hard to see the capacity of the place. Are we their exclusive guests that weekend?
Yes,
Or
we
that
are.
2 nights?
Yes.
Great.
Guess makes it sound a little more something than it
Yes,
is.
well,
But,
yeah.
are we ready to vote? All in favor? Thank you. Action K is our agreement with SUNY Old Westbury over the permit to use their pool facilities. Do I have a motion? And second, questions? All in favor? Thank you. If there's no objection, I'm going to group actions L, M, N, and O, which provide various services to students. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions on those 4 actions? All in favor? Thank you. Action P is the approval of the IEPs. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, we will move on to board committees. We did have a list at one point of what they all were.
I have them.
I was like, you guys know who you were. We're now going to have, please, Joanna. Wellness you're doing?
Yes, wellness. We have had 2 meetings. The first one was organizational, our discussion really focused on adherence to the wellness policy that we approved last year. There was a discussion about who was the appropriate person to follow through on some of those regulations, but that was suggested that the principals were in order to do that. 2 points from the wellness policy that needs to be reiterated, and it seems to be a problem in some of the schools, is one, that water should be available to kids all day long. And secondly, taking away an opportunity for physical activity as punishment is really not acceptable. This year, we have 2 student members. We look forward to their input. At our second meeting, we also just had a lengthy discussion and evaluation of Red Ribbon Week. And in as much as there were some very good things going on, it's, I think, if we were to be fair, it's spotty at best in some areas. And so the effort needs some coordination. And the committee really felt that that would enable kids in one elementary school to have that same experience as what's going on in the others. And obviously, the goal is to improve the programming across the district. Our social worker, Risa Berg, forwarded relevant articles to teachers during Red Ribbon Week for their discussion in classes. I think there was a certain level of being uncomfortable with the content, and so she was talking about ideas to better that procedure for next year. And she has surveyed the staff for improvement and recommendations. There was a very lengthy discussion and recommendation by the committee to reestablish the position of an elementary health educator. And Megan McCormick shared, who's our elementary physical education teacher, conducted the annual school index survey based on school wellness environment, school meals, health education, physical education, and staff involvement. We scored in the 89th percentile. So that is the report from wellness.
Thank you.
It's good news.
Do you want to go, Rich?
Sure.
Yeah,
We can just
health
do
and
that one.
safety?
Sure. So in terms of safety committee, we met last on November 14th. We have another meeting scheduled for the 17th of December. Much of what we discussed was presented tonight, so I don't really have a lot to say about that. There are some peripheral issues that were discussed, ranging back from things that were brought up early on. For example, we're looking at the possible, placement of a walk in front of the high school now, and we're costing that out to see what'll happen with that. We know that the faculty and staff have gone through training, tabletop drills have been carried out. Dr. Girizzo has been informing the public via the text about the lockdown drills. That's something that's new and appreciated. Another item that did come up for discussion, it was brought up last year, but we sort of didn't go very far with it, and it was suggested by President Jones that we look a little bit more carefully about the issue of food allergies, certain students that have significant problems with food allergies, and what the district is going to do to try and safeguard these students. I also am on the policy committee, so I guess I'll do that as well.
Thank you, yes.
Policy committee met for the first time on October 18th, and basically we sort of decided how we were going to progress. We are looking this year at Series 4000 instruction and Series 5000 students, and the work is going to be broken up accordingly. So we decided on schedule for the year, so we're meeting monthly. We'll be actually meeting next week to discuss the 4000 series, or part of the 4000 series, and our goal is by the end of January to get through the 4000s and present our findings to the board for discussion. Afterwards, then we'll tackle the 5000. We discussed also the NISBA, compliance review situation, and we seem to feel that it would be a good thing for the district to proceed with that, and I'm glad that we approved it tonight.
Great. Thank you. Should we just keep coming down the table?
Legislative Action Committee, LAC, met for the first time. All the 4 new members were there, 5 of the 6 returnees. It was a very good start, plus the 3 liaisons, and the superintendent joined us as well, which we appreciated. Jen Lamond volunteered to assist the chairperson, Cheryl Brown. We reviewed the topics set forth by the board, and in our discussions, there were some that are independent, but we discussed that most of them fall into sort of a research and then action kind of split, and that the research part was what was needed to spur the action. So individual members let us know what their interests were, and we fell into areas of interest aligned around the topics that we as a board had come up with directionally. And then when it comes time, they feel, based on their research, that there's an action moment, they'll present that to the board, then the board will approve or say not now, or not at all, to that action. And that's pretty much it. It was a good meeting. Everyone set off on their way, and we're looking forward to a good year.
That's great.
Me, construction steering, and bond.
I was going to say, I wasn't sure who had, what the split was on the bond. You've got both?
We're both on lacking on construction steering, so Dave
okay.
did
You've got
lack.
bond
I
steering
have
and
construction steering and bond.
Right.
Okay, so it's late. I'm going to try and make this, the highlights for you. On construction steering, the high school mansard, it's in the process of being corrected. The wrong color was installed on some of the panels, and there's been an agreement to correct that. We're just determining what is the best way to do that. The high school entrance, I think that Rich touched on this a little bit, that we are using some of the grant money from Assemblyman Levine to remove some of the bushes and repair the sidewalk, correct? That's basically...
More or less.
More or less. We also have some other money, so we're looking at that overall, but we'll at least get the safety issues addressed. Phase 3 of the bond work from the prior bond has been completed. On the capital reserve projects, the mechanical drawings have been completed with the exception of the mechanical drawings for the high school. The middle school AC projects and electric replacements projects have been submitted to SED, and that has been acknowledged. For capital projects, which are different than capital reserve projects, they are ones that we build into our budgets. The drawings and designs for the cafeteria ceiling at the high school has been submitted to SED. It's in secret process now, and there are some questions that they've had that are being addressed. The scoreboard is up and running at the high school, and the middle school softball field will be addressed through Assemblyman Levine's grant. Repair reserve, the elementary school windows repair has been completed, and the high school asbestos abatement project around the windows has been completed. Seacliff Elementary, the trees have been removed that were infected, and new trees have been planted, and that's about it for important items on construction steering. I'm going to switch over to bond steering because that falls in place with this. Our new architects have completed all their interviews with the administrators in all the buildings. They are scheduled to go on December 6th to walk through the buildings with the principals and the head custodians. We plan on having another meeting as a bond steering committee in the beginning of January to get a better idea as to the scope and the timeline. We hope to have some meetings with the public when we have a better assessment of the overall plan sometime in February or March of the upcoming year. The hopeful timeline is that we will have this bond put together and out for a vote in the fall of 2019.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Did we miss any committees? I think we got them. I looked at it, so, yeah. Thank you all. That was very informative and helpful. That brings us to comments from the public. Should I give the... I think we're good. Okay. We're up to discussion 10. We are now on to old business. Dave.
I'd like to make a motion, let the clutters go home, and we can bring the question of elections in the schools and board elections of the schools to be on a future agenda, while noting that I thought it was well taken that when people from the community do follow these procedures and let us know, and from my personal perspective, approach us very respectfully, it certainly is worthy of bringing to our attention and discussing it. So thank you.
I would happily second your motion. Board? Consensus? Thank you.
We can go home now.
We got it, Dave got it in there as soon as he could. Thank you.
When do you, what kind of timeline do you want to set to have that discussion?
We have,
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry.
What kind of timeline do you want to set to have that discussion?
the high school report's the next meeting, right?
I would say by the end of January, no later than the end of January.
Yeah, you have to go ahead and do it because you got to notice it, right?
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Further old business?
Do you want me to keep going? I have one more.
You have more old? Yeah.
Yes. Busing, first of all, Michelle gave us a great little tour today.
Yes.
There was wildlife, it was awesome. There's a very angry raccoon, or is he friendly enough? You got closer to him, I don't know. Or her. So that was very helpful. We discussed the ridership study, and we discussed busing in the past. Just to follow up on that, we got some info on the ridership study that was very helpful, but also conducted exclusively in pretty much gorgeous early fall weather. I'd like to see a week in January when it's cold, and potentially there's some more inclement weather, so we can really get a sense that we're not going to take on more than we think is sensible. But I would like to look at the discussion. I think right now 0.75 for K through 6 is where we are. I think possibly we could look at the costing for K through 12 for 0.75 and see where that would take us, because our buses are still less empty, but certainly not full. That's something I'd like to see.
Dave, on that, maybe we could even look at the elementary school, reducing the mileage even further for them. As you know, Glen Head has a huge problem with parking and drop-off. And if there were more students that were eligible for busing at that particular school, it would be incredibly helpful, I think, to alleviate that situation potentially.
And I also think for younger kids, right, a half mile is a more reasonable.
I think it's, you're not having you're not sending your 6-year-old off, 0.7 miles with their backpack and lunch, you're just not.
I think it's a great addition. I think what we've been doing, if my understanding is, we've been taking, I don't say baby steps, but we've been taking quantum
Quarter mile steps.
incremental steps to make sure that we didn't go
Up
too
about a
far.
quarter mile.
But it's all been under the heading of at no additional cost. And so I think as we've increased our ridership, which to some degree reduces our pollution and traffic and general aggression in our community, I think it would be a home run if we could continue doing that and shorten those distances. So sure.
Okay,
I'd be all for it. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing you say is you'd like us to, so firstly, we'll do a ridership, we'll re-up the ridership study when the weather gets bad. So we'll do that. That's something we do. With regard to the transportation limits, we'll do a ridership analysis and study on reducing from 1 mile to 3/4 of a mile for secondary, and from 3/4 of a mile to half a mile for elementary. And we'll see what the ridership is on those elementary buses, and to the extent that we could make this happen in the same way at no additional cost, we will let the board know, and make that part of our plans for the spring vote.
Great.
Fair?
Yep.
More than fair. Thank
Fair.
you.
Okay.
Further old business? On to the new business. New business?
New business. I would like to propose that we have a meeting for the board on the topic of special education to be conducted by council. Anyone want to second that? Anyone want to second that with me?
Absolutely. Are you, we're saying,
or any other topic?
A separate setting or what?
A separate setting.
Yeah.
Separate setting.
Separate setting, like, retreat kind of setting, which does not mean that we go someplace nice with cocktails. I've been waiting for that to happen for 6 years, so far no luck.
Could I amend that idea to, and I don't know if we do this already for our special ed staff, or any staff member who participates in developing IEPs, Mr. Feldman's course on developing an IEP was outstanding, and I was in a room with many, many educators, school psychologists, chair people, who actually tried to argue with you about whether something was, and they were in the wrong. But I think in terms of professional development, I think a tune-up in that area for our staff who puts together IEPs, and I'm not saying that they do a terrible job, but we do have many new special educators coming in to teach in our fine schools, and I think it would be worthwhile if it's something that the directorship of special ed believes might be worthwhile. I would support that as a trustee to fund. It's very well done.
So, and Chris is, excuse me, Chris is in regular contact with Jack on PD needs, but absolutely.
And, I think it would be a good idea if we thought about these things every once in a while. I mean, Lisa just happened to mention to me, and I did see on the December 7th law conference, you're speaking about it again. Probably from a different perspective, right? From a different. No, okay. But there may be topics that come up that are of interest to the board that we may want to think about having speakers come in. And it could be open to the public as well. It doesn't have to just be us. And I think it's something we should talk about, because we have that ability with council. Some of those that's included in our retainer, and we never really utilized
on the
it.
agenda the last time we tried to have a retreat. But we should.
No, but items of interest, like, I go to that law conference, I try and go every year, and one year they did a very good presentation, it was 2 years ago, on opioid crisis, and the response and what different districts were doing in response to the opioid crisis. They had one on construction law, things that are quite interesting.
Yeah, professional development can certainly apply to us.
It certainly can.
And I attended not as a trustee, in my role as a trustee, as a professional, as a social worker who works with families with children with special needs. So I wanted to just gain that perspective. But it was very, very informative, very worthwhile.
So we'll reach out to the board on some dates. And you, Jack.
Can I just make one observation, just among us? The presentation that I would do for you might not be the same as a public presentation I would do.
That's fine.
I mean, Liz knows that one of the things I kind of put in as a caveat when I was speaking to a large group was, I asked how many parent advocates were in the room, and I asked them to leave. They wouldn't, but I wanted them to leave just for little bits of it, because there were some things I wanted to share that I don't want to share with parent advocates, so it's something I just would like you to keep in mind.
No, that's fine. I just, like, special ed is something that, unless you've had experience in it, you don't really understand as a board member. I mean, like, many of the concepts are easy, but that, to me, is a whole morass that I just really have no, like, comprehensive. Yeah, but it's very process oriented, right? So it has to be done appropriately. So we sign off on these IEPs, and we sign off on settlement agreements where we place students outside of the district, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year when you total that up, right? So I to have a better knowledge of what we're agreeing to and authorizing as fiduciaries would be helpful.
I think we're agreed.
We're agreed that a board presentation or a different
A retreat-style
okay.
presentation to.
I'd also like to suggest, I know that when I reviewed IEPs, I really learned a great deal, so Mary Ann, you might want to join that committee.
I am on so many committees, Joanna. I think I'm on like 5.
Just saying.
We can kick you outside.
Just take a scan.
And anything that meets at 4:15 does not work till Santa brings me the helicopter.
So we're going to send out, so we'll put it, we'll get this scheduled.
Budget priority.
Through the board.
Mary Ann's helicopter.
The board, I felt there was consensus among the board that we would want LAC to look at the red flag law. Yes?
Yes.
LEA was fine
Yes.
with that? Okay, I wanted to double check. Joanna, maybe you want to mention CASA's upcoming event? Because I think there's some excitement about it.
There is some
Yeah, there-
excitement. We're hoping we get a crowd on this one. We are holding a program at the middle school on Monday, December 17th.
Yeah.
It is called In Plain Sight, and it is company from Westchester is coming down and setting up a teenager's bedroom, and showing what might be right underneath your nose regarding drug activity by your teenager. So, 7 o'clock, and I understand it's a great presentation, so
Excellent.
I would encourage everyone to show up.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have other new business, or is there a motion to open it up to
That
public
is a
comment
program
again?
for parents only.
Yes, I noticed the flyer says
It is a
specifically it's only for
It's on the
adults.
flyer for parents only.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the next day there'll be a whole bunch of new spots.
You just have to dust under the bed.
That's all it takes.
It's all under the bed.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right. Thank you, trustees. I appreciate your time.
Peter, thank you.